Finally, the clock had struck 2, and I was already moseying out the door to go home from work. The air was full of excitement as I remembered that I had nothing to do that afternoon except for go home, catch up on Mad Men, and tell my cat how much I loved him. Now, after working in downtown Houston for almost 2 years, I had grown accustomed to the creative characters that frequently came by. I also have the luxury of working across the street from the metro station. That meant there's never really a shortage of excitement to go around. Because of that, nothing really fazed me anymore until something did. Or someone, rather. Now, since I'm downtown daily, I've grown to become very, very patient. And seeing as my parking garage is across from one of the busiest streets downtown, I have owned that patience. And on that day, as any other day, I waited for my chance to cross the street and begin my journey home. And as I'm standing alongside the road, waiting for the cars to pass, I casually glance around me and see a woman smiling at me. And I think nothing of it, and I just smile back. Maybe she was going home to love on her cat too. Maybe she could sense the cat love that I also possessed. Seconds pass, more cars go by, and I'm still waiting. But I'm also starting to feel a presence of eyes on me. You know when you can just tell that someone is burning a deep, thick hole into the side of your head? I felt that, and I knew immediately where it was coming from, so I glanced over, and that same woman who had smiled at me earlier is now staring at me. Except this time, I took the chance to really look at her, and she's well-dressed in a canary yellow suit that had pastel pink trimming, and around her neck was a loosely wrapped scarf that held a plethora of colors. Her blazing red hair was fixed into a bun that sat just so on top of her head, and her skin was a creamy shade of ivory white that made her emerald eyes perfectly pop into place. But then there was that smile. There was something about her smile that gave everything away, that maybe something wasn't right, and that made me question her behavior at all. Her Cheshire grin was ear to ear, bearing almost every tooth that she had to spare, and her lips were spread so wide that eventually they just turned into thin lines plastered on her face. And in this moment, I looked again at those emerald eyes, and I noticed that they were actually blank, completely and totally desolate of any emotion or depth. And it was then that I noticed that her posture hadn't changed during our few moments with each other. Her body was crooked, yet perfectly aligned towards me. Her hips and legs were facing the street, yet her chest and shoulders were directed towards me, like a mannequin that had come to life and was waiting to be dressed. I looked away, thinking I must be seeing things, that this was simply an illusion playing in my tired mind. I mean, why would she be staring at me like that? And I thought, well, maybe I'm the asshole who's just staring at this woman who's simply waiting to go home, just like me. Now, I know I shouldn't have glanced again. As a child, I was told that it's impolite to stare, and as much as I didn't want to, I felt compelled to do so, and of course I did, and I knew at this point that that was a very stupid idea. When I glanced over this time, her face had completely changed. She had now pursed her lips into a tight fit of fury, and her eyes that were previously vacant and bare were now reeling with rage. Crazed and deranged, they made her look like a wild dog that was infected with rabies and hadn't eaten for days, and her expression just paralyzed me. And I stood there, cold in my tracks, as she began to creep towards me. Step by step, with nothing but madness in her eyes. With every step that she took, waves of fear just engulfed me. And my body that was previously stoic in stance began to shake and shiver with fear. And as she got closer and closer, I couldn't stand the trembling any longer, and the moment I saw the coast was clear, I leapt towards the parking garage, fearing that nothing and no one could save me, and I ran all the way to the car. I looked back every moment or two just to make sure that she wasn't following me, and I jumped into my car, shaking and panting and fumbling with my keys, and I finally started the car and began to reverse out of the parking lot. And as I'm reversing, I kept an eye on this woman. I had to keep an eye on her. Maybe she would finally catch me, and then Lord knows what she would do to me. However, I am downtown, and like clockwork, the streets were again loaded with cars. And in this moment, I had no choice but to wait. So I did. And I didn't let her eyes off of her for a second, and now I had a direct view of her. And she was still there, staring at the same spot where I had previously stood. Except that now she began to straighten her stance, look around, take out her phone, and begin to text. Then she finished her message, straightened her clothes, went back to her previous stance, and began to smile at the ground again. Okay, at this point, I was beside myself, second guessing every single thought and sight that I had in those last few moments. I tried to tell myself that everything I saw was true. I mean, it was real, it had to be. The street finally cleared up and I was able to evacuate, and though I felt safe in my car, I still let out a silent cry as my heart pitter-pattered away. Now, I've since told this story. I've thought of it happening. I've retraced my thoughts and time again of those moments. And what has struck me on this bizarre interaction is the fear that it brought out of me. This feeling in my stomach that took over all of my thoughts of what she could do to me, what she could hurt me with, that fear that made me run. Run to the car like a frightened child in a haunted house. Run to the car like I wasn't a grown-ass woman who paid taxes, for crying out loud. I should have passed it off as nothing, but I couldn't, and I didn't. And every day I walk out to my car, and every day a part of me sweats with fear.